They fined me $1,200 for soil erosion before I even planted a thing. 48 hours later, I found a clause buried in their own charter, Article 9, Section B, that made their entire enforcement authority optional. That's when I started printing receipts. Welcome to HOA Max. I'm Jake Lawson, civil engineer out of Denton County, Texas, and apparently the newest villain in a suburban soap opera. If you're new here, I restore old properties the right way. Legally, clean permits, no shortcuts. Hit subscribe if you like seeing small-town power games lose to actual law. And seriously, where are you watching from? I always like knowing what your local ordinances look like. Anyway, here's how it started. Last spring, I bought a 120-year-old farmhouse just outside the jurisdiction of the Meadow Ridge HOA. The surveyor confirmed it twice. Parcel 17B, unincorporated. The place was leaning at 12 degrees, roof sagged. Termites had eaten a corner post like it was breakfast. My wife had wanted to walk away, but I'd promised my late father I'd save at least one piece of the Lawson homestead line. He died 6 months earlier, lung cancer, leaving behind a stack of blueprints and the smell of coffee and cedar dust. That smell hit me every time I opened the tool shed. The first 2 months were calm. I repaired the foundation with pier beams, ran new copper water lines, and rebuilt the porch railing exactly as shown in a 1904 photograph from the county archive. Then one morning in July, while I was setting trim around the bay window, a white SUV rolled up. Out stepped a woman with sunglasses so large they covered half her face, clipboard in hand, posture like a meter stick. She didn't say hello. She said, "You can't alter a historical facade without board approval." I looked at her, nail gun still in hand. "Board, the Meadow Ridge HOA," she said. "You're in violation of Section 4, architectural conformity." I told her this property wasn't in Meadow Ridge. She waved her clipboard like a badge. "We maintain jurisdiction up to the old creek bed. Your fence crosses it." I'd checked that fence line myself, survey pins, GPS coordinates, all of it. But arguing on the lawn never ends well. So I said, "Ma'am, feel free to send me something official." 2 days later, I got an envelope. Violation, notice number 002713. Fine, $1,200. Offense, unauthorized modification of shared frontage. That's when the old fear hit. The one that comes when you realize a single piece of paper can threaten the place you built with your hands. I'd lost my father's workshop to a bank lien mistake once. I wasn't going through that again. I drove to the county recorder's office in Denton and spent 6 hours combing through plats and deeds until my eyes blurred from a microfiche reader. There was 1903 plat filed by Samuel Owens, the original owner, clearly marking parcel 17B as outside the Meadow Ridge subdivision, separated by a 32-foot easement owned by the county for drainage. Knowledge nugget number 1. Easements, not fences, define jurisdiction boundaries. If a drainage or utility easement runs between parcels, it typically breaks HOA control unless expressly annexed, something Meadow Ridge never did. By the end of that day, I had 10 certified copies and a headache that tasted like toner and bad coffee. But it wasn't enough. People like Karen, her name really was Karen Phelps, HOA president, don't back off when faced with facts. They escalate. The next morning, she was parked by my mailbox snapping photos. When I asked if I could help her, she said, "You can't have a mailbox at that height. Ours are standardized." I said, "I'm not one of yours." She smirked. "Everyone around here is." That smirk did something to me. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. I decided right then I'd document every word, every visit, every letter. I set up a camera on the porch. Perfectly legal under Texas's one-party consent rule for audio and unrestricted for video on private property. I kept a logbook by the door, noting date, time, and plate numbers. By August 15th, I had 3 notices totaling $2,850 in fines. They mailed them certified, probably to look intimidating. I signed each receipt and slid them into a binder labeled Exhibits. My friend Nate, a former city inspector with ink-stained cuffs and a permanent coffee thermos, looked through the folder, and laughed. Jake, they're writing fiction. But fiction costs you real money if you don't answer it. He put me in touch with someone. Attorney Lisa Gomez, small-framed, steel-eyed, known for quoting statutes faster than most people breathe. She flipped through the papers, muttered, "Selective enforcement, unincorporated land, and possibly mail fraud if they send demands outside their jurisdiction." She looked up at me. "Want to make them regret it, or just make them stop?" "Both," I said. That night, sitting on the porch with the crickets buzzing and a legal pad balanced on my knee, I wrote one sentence. If they want control so badly, let's see how much it costs to own it. The farmhouse smelled like old pine and sweat. My father's hammer hung on the wall beside the window. I ran my hand over the handle, the grooves worn smooth from his grip, and felt something settle inside me. Not rage, exactly. Precision. I didn't know yet that the first reversal would come from the HOA's own debts, or that the second would rewrite their entire charter. I just knew this. I wasn't the kind of man who bowed to clipboards and empty authority. The next morning, before sunrise, I headed for the county clerk's building with a thermos of coffee and a plan forming like blueprints in my head. The first file I needed was public record, lien assignments. If the HOA owed more than they could collect, the note holder held the power. I had a hunch who that might be, and I was right. But that part of the story, how I turned a farmhouse restoration into a lawful takeover of their own leverage, starts the next chapter. The HOA's debt was sitting quietly in the county's digital index, masked by a shell name, Meadow Ridge Civic Improvement Trust. Filed 2012, balance owed, $42, $380 to a landscaping vendor, and another $18,000 on a maintenance bond they never released. The bond was still assigned to a local surety called Lone Star Mutual. I'd done engineering work for them years ago. I still had a contact, Eddie Tran, compliance analyst, the kind of guy who lived off black coffee and bad fluorescent lighting. When I called him, he chuckled, "You want gossip or data?" "Data, the good kind." He typed for maybe 20 seconds, then said, "Jake, they never renewed their secondary surety rider. Technically, the HOA's liability bond lapsed 2 years ago. They're operating without coverage." That line hit like the smell of rain before a storm. Operating without coverage meant any board action, fines, enforcement, even physical entry, was legally exposed. "Can you send that in writing?" I asked. He laughed again. "Public record. I'll just tell you which drawer to look in." I did. Drawer 12F, folder stamped, expired. I made copies, paid $4 in cash, and walked out with the first real leverage I'd felt since this started. But Karen wasn't slowing down. By September, she'd filed what she called a lien intent with her board. The letter arrived certified. Again, it claimed $4,050 in accrued fines plus $600 in administrative costs. My wife found it in the mailbox, and her hands shook reading it. That's when I decided to act fast but methodically. I documented the letter under Exhibit 4. I scanned the envelope, postmarked from a private P.O. box, not the HOA's registered address. Another strike. Lisa, my attorney, smirked when she saw it. "You're lucky this is Texas. We have some of the toughest penalties for false filings. But don't jump the gun. Let them dig the hole." We started what she called the quiet dig. I pulled HOA meeting minutes from their website archives, back to 2016. That's when a developer named Delcher Properties had transferred common area rights to the HOA, but left a technical footnote. The board's jurisdiction extended only to the limits of the recorded subdivision parcels. The farmhouse? Not one of them. Knowledge nugget number 2. In most states, HOAs cannot enforce covenants beyond their recorded subdivision boundaries. Even shared roads require annexation votes and filed amendments. Anything else is paper noise. On a Friday evening, Nate came by with barbecue and his old laptop. We poured through maps until the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods. My daughter, 9 years old, came out with lemonade and asked, "Daddy, why are those people mad about our house?" I told her, "Because they forgot what real ownership means, sweetheart. We're going to remind them." 2 weeks later, the HOA called for a special session. It wasn't about me. Officially, but everyone knew. They posted flyers on neighborhood mailboxes. Unauthorized construction on heritage parcel. Emergency vote September 22nd. Lisa told me not to attend. Let them show their process flaws. We'll need every minute on record. So I stayed home, lights off, camera rolling from the porch. You could hear voices from the community center half a mile away, amplified over the lake. At 9:14 p.m., the HOA Facebook page lit up. Board approves further action to preserve neighborhood integrity. Integrity. That word has been abused more than any other by bureaucrats with too much time. The next day, I received another notice. Inspection scheduled 72 hours. Karen showed up again, clipboard ready. 2 board members behind her like backup singers. She pointed at my porch lights. You installed non-conforming fixtures. They came with the house. I said, they emit above the lumen limit. Section 9. She reached for her phone like she was calling an air support. Refusal to comply will escalate the matter. I could almost hear Lisa's voice in my head. Let them overcommit. Go ahead, I said. Just make sure you record your measurements accurately. 3 days later, an incident report surfaced online. Karen claimed I had obstructed inspection and used verbal aggression. Nate laughed so hard, he nearly choked on his coffee. You aggressive? The man who apologizes to screws. Still, it bothered me. Not the lie, the intent. They were building a case. I needed to stay ahead. Early October, I took a half day off work and drove to the county appraisal office. That's where I found the quiet bombshell. Meadow Ridge's boundary description still used the 1978 survey, which excluded all land beyond the creek. The county had rejected their annexation request twice, the last denial dated February 11th, 2020. That meant every citation, every letter, every fine was legally null. I called Lisa. We're sitting on gold. Not yet, she said. They'll file one more thing. They always do before they fold. Sure enough, by Halloween, a uniformed deputy showed up at my gate with a notice to appear in small claims court for unpaid HOA fines. The deputy looked embarrassed. They're filing these like traffic tickets, he said, shaking his head. You got receipts? Stacks, I said. He nodded. Then you'll be fine. See you there. That night, as the wind rattled the shutters and the smell of dry leaves filled the kitchen, my wife asked, Are we really going to court over porch lights? No, I said, sliding the folder across the table. We're going to court over jurisdiction, and they're about to lose theirs. Before bed, I opened my father's old toolbox and found the small brass level he'd given me when I turned 18. I held it up to the lamp. The bubble sat perfectly centered. It made me think justice should look like that, balanced, not tilted by noise. Early the next morning, before the hearing, I recorded a short update for the channel. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that treats power like a toy, drop your advice in the comments. Tell others how you fought back, or at least like the video so more homeowners see what's coming. The camera caught the rising sun to the porch rails, gold and steady. I didn't know it yet, but the next 72 hours would pull the thread that unraveled everything they'd built. The courthouse smelled like dust and burnt coffee. Room 214, Justice of the Peace. I'd sat through dozens of zoning hearings before, but this one felt personal, like someone had stapled my name to a stack of nonsense. Karen was already there, front row, crisp blazer, binder thick as a phone book. Her vice president, a man with the posture of a coat rack, sat beside her. When the clerk called the case, Meadow Ridge HOA versus Lawson, docket 2023 to 1182, I stood calm. Lisa stepped forward. Her blazer sleeves rolled once, a yellow legal pad in hand. The judge, an older man with a gravelly voice, squinted at the filing. HOA fines on unincorporated property? Interesting. Karen jumped up before being invited. Your Honor, the defendant's parcel borders are subdivision. He's altering shared visibility lines. Lisa interrupted, smooth but firm. Your Honor, the HOA has no recorded annexation for parcel 17B. We have certified plats, the 1978 survey, and a 2020 denial of boundary expansion. Every notice they issued was extra-jurisdictional. Karen flushed. He's disrupting community harmony. The judge raised an eyebrow. Harmony isn't a legal boundary, Miss Phelps. Do you have evidence of annexation? Karen rifled through her binder, pulling loose papers, all with mismatched headers. None stamped by the county. Lisa handed him one neat folder. Certified copies, signatures, raised seals. The courtroom fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. After 5 minutes of reading, the judge looked up. Case dismissed. Defendant retains all rights to property use consistent with county zoning. HOA lacks standing. He gave a half-smile. Maybe worry less about his porch lights. Karen's jaw tightened like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. When we walked out, the deputy who'd served me nodded. Told you. Seen this movie before. Lisa grinned. That was Act 1. I should have felt relieved. But I didn't. Karen wasn't the type to accept a loss quietly. That evening, she posted a screed on the HOA page. Local property owner exploits loopholes to evade community standards. The post got 50 comments, half supportive, half skeptical. Nate called me laughing. She's marketing you for free. You should tag your channel. Instead, I started what I call the Dig 2.0. If they were going to weaponize procedure, I'd turn procedure into my shield. I filed a public information request with the county to see every complaint Meadow Ridge had filed in the past 2 years. 64 in total. 42 dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. Knowledge nugget number 3. Most states require HOAs to record enforcement authority in county property records. Without that, their notices are only warnings, not legal instruments. By the following week, my binder had grown into 2 volumes. I color-coded everything. Blue for jurisdiction, red for harassment, green for communications. Lisa said it looked like an engineer built a murder board. Around November 10th, I found the document that changed everything. It was a vendor lien transfer. Meadow Ridge's landscaper had sold their unpaid invoices to a factoring company for 58 cents on the dollar. The buyer? A holding firm in Fort Worth. I recognized the address. It was tied to an old acquaintance who handled small asset portfolios. I called him. Hey, you still buy dead HOA paper? He chuckled. If it smells like interest, sure. Why? Because you might want to unload one. I'll pay you face value plus fees. He paused. You want their lien note? I want their leverage. That's when the idea turned from defense to offense. It took a week of filings, notarizations, and 1 trip to the county treasurer, but by Thanksgiving, I owned the debt instrument the HOA was using to stay solvent. They didn't even know it yet. Lisa nearly spit out her coffee when I told her, you bought their leash. Technically, I bought the paper that holds their surety. She smiled. Keep that quiet until they corner themselves again. Then drop it like a gavel. At home, the farmhouse finally smelled like fresh paint instead of mildew. My daughter was stringing Christmas lights along the porch railing when Karen drove by slowly, pretending to look at her phone. My wife whispered, she's obsessed. I said, good. Obsession makes people sloppy. That night, I filmed a new clip for the channel. For anyone who's ever been fined by an HOA for something absurd, trash cans, shutters, even mailbox color, where's your line? How far should an HOA control your property? Drop your answer below. As the comments rolled in, I realized this wasn't just my fight. Hundreds of people had similar stories. Some worse. One guy wrote about being fined $500 for parking in his own driveway. Another said his HOA banned solar panels despite state incentives. This wasn't a niche problem. It was a quiet epidemic of bad governance hiding behind vinyl fences and polite newsletters. Karen didn't know any of that yet. She only knew she'd lost 1 round and wanted another. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the HOA's attorney. They were appealing the dismissal and reasserting community authority pending reconsideration. The language was pompous enough to choke a judge. Lisa smiled. Perfect. They're doubling down with no insurance coverage. Keep every envelope. I store it all in a fireproof box in the workshop. When the lid clicked shut, the sound was final like a seal. The next morning, Frost coated the mailbox. A new notice. Annual dues increase. 15% effective January 1st. Nate whistled when he saw it. They're trying to raise money to fight you. I said, they're raising money to pay me. They just don't know it yet. Because when the new year hit, that unpaid vendor lien would mature. And as a legal holder, I'd have the right to audit their financials. The thought of Karen's face when she realized who now held the strings, that was almost worth a month of stress. But first, I needed them to overreach one more time, in public, with a neutral authority watching. They gave me that opening faster than I expected. Mid-January, a glossy letter landed in every resident's mailbox. Emergency special assessment. $1,200 per household, due in 30 days, to cover legal defense costs incurred on behalf of the association. It was signed by Karen herself in blue ink, as if her signature made extortion neighborly. I sat at my kitchen table, heater humming, reading it 3 times before I laughed out loud. They just committed a bylaw violation in writing. I said to my wife. She looked half worried, half exhausted. Does that mean we're finally done with them? Not yet, I said. It means we're halfway there. I called Lisa that afternoon. She didn't answer. She was in a deposition. 2 hours later, she texted, perfect overreach. Check their notice quorum. So I did. Their bylaws required a 75% member vote for any special assessment above 10% of annual dues. The notice showed no vote, just a board decision. That was my trigger. Knowledge nugget number 4. Most HOA charters require supermajority approval for assessments exceeding a set percentage. Failure to obtain consent can nullify the entire levy and expose board members to personal liability. At sunrise, I drove to the county recorder's office again. The same routine. Stale air, squeaky chairs, and a clerk who knew my coffee order. Back again, Mr. Lawson, she said. Like a bad penny, I replied. By noon, I had copies of their filings. Plus something new, the annual insurance certificate they'd submitted to the county inspector back when they did have coverage. The certificate still listed the vendor lien I now owned, which meant legally I was a lien holder of record tied to their surety claim. That gave me standing to review any disbursement from that policy. I wasn't just outside their HOA anymore. On paper, I was inside it, financially. Nate nearly dropped his thermos when I showed him. Jake, that's chess. They're still playing checkers. Let's see if they noticed before the meeting. The meeting was scheduled for February 5th at the Meadow Ridge Clubhouse, a beige box with too many flags and too little sense. I parked across the street, binder in hand, and waited. The room was packed. Maybe 50 homeowners, half irritated, half curious. Karen stood at the front like a conductor, gavel in hand. She started with theatrics. We're here to defend our community values against outside interference. Someone in the crowd whispered, You mean Jake? Karen smiled tight. Yes, the individual who refuses to conform. That's when I stepped forward. Actually, I'd like to clarify a few points. Her gavel came down. You're not a member, you can't speak. According to this, I said, sliding a folder onto the podium, I am the current holder of your vendor lien note, recorded January 3rd, 2024, under file number 2401030LS. That makes me a financial stakeholder. The murmurs turned into gasps. Karen's face drained of color. That's impossible. Not only possible, I said, it's public record. And as lien holder, I'm entitled to review your assessment procedures for compliance. Starting with this one. The HOA's treasurer, an older man with shaky hands, leaned toward her. He's right, Karen. If he holds a lien, he can demand an audit. Karen slammed the gavel again. This is harassment. A county compliance officer who'd been sitting quietly in the back stood. Ma'am, I'm here as observer under the county inspector's office. The gentleman is correct. You'll need to produce your financials for review. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. That was visual beat number 1. The moment the paper hit the podium, I didn't gloat. I just looked at her and said, You wanted control. Now you answer to the person who owns your debt. After the meeting, homeowners surrounded me in the parking lot, some angry at her, some at the situation. A man named Robert, a retired firefighter, shook my hand. About time someone stood up to her. That night, Karen posted another rant online calling me a predatory investor exploiting loopholes. It backfired instantly. Comments poured in. Then why'd you send fines outside your boundary? Audit sounds fair to me. Still, the board didn't stop. They started nitpicking, sending code officers to measure my driveway slope, claiming runoff violations, photographing my fence posts. Nate called it the harassment montage, and that's exactly what it was. Within 3 weeks, I logged 9 separate visits. 2 from the county, for anonymous complaints, 1 wellness check claiming domestic disturbance, and a surprise safety inspection from a private firm that turned out to be run by Karen's cousin. Each time, I stayed polite, filmed interactions, and asked for written authorization. Not one could produce it. At home, tension rose like humidity before a storm. My wife couldn't sleep. The dog barked at every car that slowed near the gate. My daughter stopped playing on the porch. That's when fear finally edged past logic. Late one night, after another knock that turned out to be no one, I sat alone at the kitchen table with my father's level beside me. The bubble still centered, calm and steady. I whispered to it, "I'll keep us straight, Dad. I promise." The next morning, Lisa called. "You've got everything you need. The county audit will take 30 days. Until then, stay quiet. Karen's going to double down." I said, "She always does. Let her run out of rope." The following week proved her right. Karen called an emergency town security session, claiming vandalism threats. She pushed for new surveillance cameras, funded, of course, by another unsanctioned assessment. That was the overreach Lisa predicted. I had to decide whether to intervene quietly or let it burn longer. I chose patience. But I did prepare something. A file folder labeled Phase 2. Inside, every violation notice, every timestamp, every unfiled amendment. I tabbed them by color, numbered 1 through 32. The lid snapped shut with click like a gun safety. I was done reacting. It was time to act. Next stop, the March annual meeting, the one where Karen planned to crown herself for preserving neighborhood standards. That was going to be the stage for the next turn. By the time March rolled around, I'd already memorized the HOA's bylaws like a script. Karen's annual meeting was set for March 18th. 6 p.m., same clubhouse, same smell of burned coffee, and cheap carpet cleaner. I parked early, stayed in the truck, engine idling, and watched people file in with folded arms and nervous glances. Lisa had prepped me. Don't start anything, just observe. Record lawfully. Texas is one-party consent. But keep your words measured. They'll try to provoke you. I nodded, checking my recorder's red light. Measured, I said, like it was a vow. Inside, Karen was already performing. A banner read community integrity through unity, as if irony were a design choice. She called a meeting to order and launched into a speech about outside influences threatening our neighborhood's harmony. I noticed the new cameras bolted to corners. Overkill for a volunteer board meeting. First agenda item, she said, unauthorized structures at the Lawson property. I raised my hand. "Ma'am, my property isn't part of Meadow Ridge." She snapped. "You are disrupting proceedings." Then she waved to someone in the back. 2 uniformed off-duty police officers stepped forward, probably hired for intimidation. One of them, Officer Duran, I recognized. He'd once helped me file a vandalism report after teenagers spray-painted the fence last summer. He leaned toward her and said something I couldn't hear. She looked startled. "Actually," he announced, turning to the room, "this gentleman's parcel is county land. Our presence here is just for safety, not enforcement. Let's keep this civil." Neutral authority. First confirmation on record. Karen's jaw flexed. "We'll move on," she said tightly. Then came the retaliation montage's crescendo. She unveiled a slideshow of community issues, and every third photo was my house, zoomed in, annotated, dramatic. The captions read, lighting violation, fence line breach, noise concern. Each picture timed her narration like a courtroom drama. Lisa, sitting quietly beside me, leaned over. Let her finish. She's digging in public. When Karen switched slides, she said, he's been documenting us illegally. I smiled. Actually, Texas Penal Code Section 16.02 allows one-party recording when the person is a party to the communication. Informational, not legal advice. Half the room chuckled. The other half whispered. She glared. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's factual. That broke her composure. She slammed her gavel. You're trespassing. I stood, calm as a level bubble. Then call the cops, Karen. Officer Duran cleared his throat. We are the cops, ma'am, and he's not trespassing. That was a second visual beat forming. The room holding its breath, the gavel froze in midair, the officer standing like a line between sense and chaos. I left quietly, knowing the footage was gold. But leaving didn't stop the harassment. Over the next 2 weeks, the HOA started targeting my neighbors, anyone who had spoken up in my defense. Robert got cited for unapproved lawn signage because of his American flag placement. An elderly couple received a noise warning for wind chimes. Even Nate got a letter accusing him of working without license for helping me install a gate. They were trying to isolate me. Classic control strategy. Divide the crowd. Make the example bleed first. That night, I drove to Robert's house. He was sitting on the porch, flag folded across his lap. Jake, he said, they're scaring folks. People are talking about selling. I said, not yet. We're about to pull the thread. Lisa agreed. You've let them show pattern, motive, retaliation. That's harassment under state code. Documented, repeated, targeted. Still, I couldn't shake the personal weight. My daughter started asking why the neighbors weren't waving anymore. My wife stopped leaving the porch light on, afraid they'd take pictures. Every victory felt smaller than the next accusation. One night, I woke to thud outside, the sound of gravel under tires. I peered out. A car parked across the road, engine off, headlights dead. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, logged the time, 12:42 a.m. They sent a deputy to patrol. Found nothing. But the feeling stayed, the cold knot between anger and fear. That was my low point. The wound reopened, reminding me of my father's foreclosure years ago. Paper threats, official seals, fear in the mailbox. I sat in the workshop, flipping to the binder. 32 tabs. Evidence airtight. The brass level glinted under the hanging light. Still centered. I whispered, stay steady. Lisa called the next morning. Audit report came back early. And you were right. Missing funds. $27,000 unaccounted for, plus a duplicate invoice chain to a landscaping shell company. Guess who signed both sides? Karen? Karen, she confirmed. We're filing notice with the county inspector Monday. For the first time in months, the tension cracked into relief. This was more than a feud. It was fraud. I asked, how long before she finds out? Soon as they get served, Lisa said. Be ready for fireworks. That afternoon, I filmed another quick note for the channel. If you've ever watched an HOA weaponize fear, remember this. Paper cuts both ways. The same rules they quote, and you can expose them. Question is, should HOAs be allowed to fine homeowners for profit, or should that be treated as a revenue scheme? Drop your thoughts below. Comments exploded. Viewers shared stories of audits, lawsuits, class actions. One even linked to local news stations' coverage of abusive HOAs. That gave me an idea. If the county could hold them accountable, so could the press. But I needed one more spark, the moment everything unraveled in public. And it was coming faster than anyone expected. The notice of investigation hit Meadow Ridge like a thunderclap. March 28th, 9:07 a.m., certified mail stamped County Compliance Division. Karen must have opened hers the second it landed, because by 10 a.m., her SUV tore down the road and stopped right in front of my gate. She stepped out, sunglasses on, paper trembling in her hand. You did this, she shouted. I didn't bother denying it. No, I said calmly. Your bookkeeping did. She jabbed a finger toward the farmhouse. You think you can humiliate me? I've run this neighborhood for 8 years. Then you should have run it legally. Her jaw twitched. You'll regret this. I tilted my head. Karen, regret's what happens when you lose track of math. That line seemed to short-circuit her. She stormed off, tires throwing gravel like buckshot. Lisa called that afternoon. The county's moving fast. Inspector audit scheduled April 10th. Be there. Will she? She has to. They'll subpoena records. You're the complainant and lien holder. They can't shut you out. So I spent the next week tightening the case. I printed every missing line item, every photocopy, even a timeline showing double invoicing between Meadow Ridge HOA and their approved vendor, which turned out to be Karen's Brothers, LLC. Visual beat number 2 was about to happen, and I wanted it flawless. April 10th came cold and gray. The meeting was held in the county annex building, a beige rectangle with flickering ceiling lights. Inside, folding tables, bottled water, the scent of toner and fear. Karen sat at the far end, her lawyer whispering furiously beside her. On the other side, the county inspector, a man named Holt, mid-50s, crew-cut, quiet authority. He started without ceremony. We reviewed the submitted financials and found discrepancies totaling $27,000. We'll hear from the complainant first. Lisa nudged me forward. My palms were cold, but my voice was steady. Sir, these discrepancies correspond to vendor payments authorized without member vote or disclosure, routed to a related entity. That violates both HOA bylaws and County Ethics Code 312.4. Karen's lawyer objected, saying I wasn't a member. Holt raised a hand. He's the lien holder tied to your surety claim. He is standing. That's when I slid the final piece across the table, a notarized statement from Lone Star Mutual confirming the HOA's insurance lapse 2 years prior. Meaning, I said, any action taken during that gap, including fines and assessments, was uninsured and exposed homeowners to personal liability. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes darted, desperate for an exit. Holt spoke quietly but firmly. Ms. Phelps, did you notify members of this lapse? She stammered. It was a clerical delay. 2 years isn't a delay, he said. It's neglect. I looked at her then, not with triumph, but with a strange calm that comes when justice lands in real time. You wanted to protect the community. Karen, you nearly bankrupted it. Holt closed his folder. Effective immediately, the county will suspend Meadow Ridge's enforcement authority pending full audit. We'll appoint a temporary trustee panel. You'll receive notice within 7 days. Lisa exhaled slowly. That's it. She's finished. But Karen didn't leave quietly. As we stepped outside, reporters were already waiting. Local station trucks lined up by the curb. Someone had tipped them off. Probably one of the homeowners tired of her control. A microphone caught the raindrops as they started to fall. Mr. Lawson, is it true you exposed a fraudulent HOA? A reporter asked. I said, no. I exposed a system that forgot it serves people. That quote ran on the 6 o'clock news. Within 48 hours, the Meadow Ridge Facebook page was gone. The HOA's email auto-replied. Operation suspended pending audit. My phone buzzed with messages from neighbors, some apologizing, some thanking me. Still, I didn't feel like celebrating. My wife asked, is it over? Almost, I said, but reform's not the same as revenge. Because Lisa was right. What came next would decide whether the community healed or fractured. The county could dissolve the HOA entirely, or it could rebuild it under new rules. I wanted the second option. My father used to say, you can tear down a fence or you can fix the gate. One helps everyone longer. I sat that night on the porch, rain tapping the tin roof, looking at the farmhouse lights reflecting in puddles. The air smelled of wet earth and coffee. Nate called. You realize you just became the most popular man in Denton County, he said. Or the most hated. I replied. He laughed, that wheezy smoker's laugh. You ready for round 2? Always. The next morning, the inspector's office released the preliminary findings. Mismanagement confirmed. Unauthorized fines reversed. All pending liens nullified. But the key phrase came at the end. Opportunity for reformation under supervised charter revision. That was my opening for the second reversal, the reform deal. Lisa smiled when she read it. They'll need stakeholder consent to rewrite that charter. You're the stakeholder. I nodded slowly. Then let's make sure they do it right. Before that, I posted one last mid-battle update to the channel. If you've ever had an HOA fine you for nonsense, trash cans, paint, or a mailbox, what's your limit? $250, $500, $1,000. Drop your number below. Let's find out where people draw the line. The video blew up overnight. Comments from every state. Stories of broken systems, unfair boards, homeowners learning their rights. And among them, a message from someone named E. Hope, County Compliance Office. Proud of how you handled this. People need to know they can fight the right way. That felt better than any fine dismissed. Still, the reform phase will be the real test, turning a personal win into community structure. And that began with a meeting none of us could have predicted. The reform meeting was held 2 weeks later, April 24th, in the same county annex room. But this time, the chairs were rearranged in a circle, not rows. Symbolic. The air smelled of paper and disinfectant again, but there was a new current in the room. Tension laced with relief. Karen wasn't at the head anymore. She sat halfway down the line, pale and silent, her attorney gone. The county inspector, Holt, opened the meeting. We're here to discuss reformation of the Meadow Ridge HOA charter under oversight. The goal is transparency, term limits, and open records compliance. Lisa leaned toward me. They're expecting you to propose it. I wasn't sure I wanted to. After everything, the thought of helping rebuild a machine that nearly broke us felt like handing the bully back their pen. But then I saw Robert, the firefighter, sitting near the end, clutching a notebook with community suggestions scribbled in pencil. Behind him, Mrs. Dalton, the elderly widow whose mailbox had been cited 3 times, whispering a prayer. This wasn't about Karen anymore. It was about the neighbors she'd turned into collateral damage. So I stood. I'll speak, if that's okay. Holt nodded. Go ahead, Mr. Lawson. I said, I don't want Meadow Ridge destroyed. I want to remember for what happens when power forgets purpose. If we rebuild, it should be with guardrails, board term limits, public voting records, annual third-party audits, and no more closed sessions for financial matters. Karen muttered, You're grandstanding. I looked at her calmly. No, I'm restoring. Holt scribbled notes. These are sound recommendations. Lisa added, We'd also like to see a compliance clause. Any future enforcement action must cite specific recorded authority or it's void. Nate, who'd been sitting in the back with a thermos as usual, raised his hand. And maybe throw in a community service day instead of fines for small stuff. Make M help instead of paying up. That drew laughter, even a few nods. For a second, I thought Karen might explode again, but she just slumped. You've turned everyone against me. I said, No, Karen. You did that when you turned paperwork into punishment. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Holt turned toward her. Miss Phelps, the county's investigation found no criminal intent, just gross mismanagement. You'll be removed from the board permanently, but you may retain homeowner status. I suggest you accept the reforms and move forward. Her eyes welled. I was trying to keep it perfect. That hit me, not as pity, but recognition. The same obsession with control that had burned her had once nearly burned me after Dad died, when I thought I could fix everything alone. So I said quietly, Perfection doesn't build community. Patience does. The room went still. Holt wrote that down verbatim for the record. Then came the final confirmation. Motion to adopt reforms under new charter language. Robert raised his hand first. Seconded. Votes followed, unanimous, including Karen's silent nod. That was reversal number 2, sealed in real time. Leverage traded for reform. When the meeting ended, Holt extended his hand. You handled this cleanly, Mr. Lawson. You didn't just win, you reset the standard. Outside, the evening air smelled of honeysuckle and wet soil. The rain had passed, leaving the sky bruised purple and gold. Lisa smiled. You know you just turned an HOA takedown into a governance model, right? I shrugged. One neighborhood at a time. That night, The story hit local news again, headline: Homeowner forces HOA reforms after audit scandal. The footage showed the new charter signing, rain beating off the courthouse steps. It looked cinematic, like something you'd see in a film reel about accountability. A day later, the insurer reinstated Meadow Ridge's coverage under a new board, with me listed as community liaison for 6 months. Not power, just oversight. Before bed, I filmed another message to channel. If you ever wonder whether fighting back is worth it, yes, it is, but you fight smart, not loud. And I've got to ask, when your HOA crosses a line between order and harassment, where should the system draw it? Drop your take in the comments. I'll be reading every one. The next morning, the comments were flooded with stories, solidarity. Even HOA board members admitting they'd learned something. Karen hadn't spoken publicly since the reform meeting, but a week later, I found a note in my mailbox. No letterhead, no threats, just one handwritten line. You were right about patience. I'm sorry. I folded it carefully, slid it between Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 in the binder, and closed it. The sound of the latch was softer this time, almost peaceful. But there was one thing left to do, the symbolic act, the moment to close the loop. The farmhouse restoration wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a kind of monument to fairness done the hard way. So I planned one last gesture, something small but lasting. A community open day at the old property, where every neighbor could walk the land that started it all. The open day came on a Saturday in May, warm and clear, the kind of morning that smells like fresh-cut grass and second chances. I hung a simple sign at the driveway, Lawson Farm Restoration, community welcome. No sponsors, no speeches, just coffee urns on folding tables and a pot of chili simmering under the oak. Neighbors wandered in slowly at first, cautious but curious. Robert brought his flag and set it back on his porch rail with quiet pride. Mrs. Dalton arrived with a plate of lemon bars and tears in her eyes. Even the new HOA interim board showed up, clipboards down, hands in pockets. The farmhouse looked alive again, white siding gleaming, porch rail straight, wind chimes glinting in the sun. My daughter ran barefoot across the yard, her laughter mixing with the crunch of gravel as cars parked along the road. For the first time in a year, it felt like a neighborhood again, not a battlefield. I gave a short talk, not from a podium, just standing on the steps. A year ago, this place was paperwork and noise. Today, it's people again. We prove that the rules meant to protect us only work when they're transparent, and that fixing what's broken doesn't always mean tearing it down. The crowd clapped softly, polite but genuine. Karen stood near the back, sunglasses off this time. When everyone started drifting toward the chili pot, she stepped forward. "You kept your word," she said. "I said I'd restore it." I answered. She hesitated. They asked if I'd stay on the committee for gardening, not governance. "That's probably the right seat," I said, and meant it. A reporter from the same local station was filming snippets. He asked if I had a closing thought for viewers. I said, "Yeah, don't mistake compliance for community. The difference is empathy." That line made the evening news. Later, as the sun dipped low, I lit a small fire in the pit behind the barn. One by one, I fed the old violation notices into it, each curling page a chapter closing. The last one, the first $1,200 fine they'd sent me, turned to ash slowest, edges glowing orange before folding inward like a tired leaf. Visual beat number 3. The notice curling in the fire pit, dusklight flickering on the farmhouse windows. Lisa stopped by near dark, hands in her jacket pockets. "So that's it?" "Pretty much," I said. "Audit's done. Charter's signed. Boards are formed. County will oversee for 2 years. Clean slate." She nodded. "You know, most people would have settled for payback." "Yeah," I said, tossing another scrap of paper into the fire. "But payback doesn't rebuild anything." The next week, Holt sent the final report. Official closure. Karen's removal law board restructured. Reforms ratified. Compliance plan approved. The last page listed. Community trust initiated. Lawson Farm Oversight Liaison. 6-month term. The news segment aired that weekend. Aerial shots of the farmhouse, clips of neighbors smiling, the headline reading From Few to Reform, the HOA that changed its rules. And the montage rolled on. Karen tending to the garden beds by the clubhouse, Robert organizing a flag-raising day, Mrs. Dalton hosting a bake sale for the local firehouse. What changed after was subtle but steady. Dues dropped by 10%, records went online, and for the first time, homeowners could see where their money went. A small victory with a big echo. Before signing off the channel update, I added the final note, the pre-ending CTA. If you believe I fought the right way and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. And as responsible citizens, share this one, because sunlight's the best disinfectant. Then I turned the camera around, showing the porch light glowing on the newly restored sign that read Lawson Farm, EST 1904, restored 2024. I smiled and said quietly, next case might not be mine, but it'll start the same way, with someone reading the fine print. The screen faded out on the farmhouse, golden under the porch lamp, wind rustling the oak leaves like applause.